Hello everybody, this is Dark Skeleton, and today I'm going to be taking a look at 67 fan-made cards made by one of my Hearthstone buddies, Cold, and his battle tag is Cold1207 if you want to go ahead and contact him about this stuff. But yeah, it looks like he's seriously put some effort into it, and he's been wanting me to review them for a while. So here we go, this should be pretty interesting, and I know Grand Tournament's coming out, but they've been kind of slow in the card announcements recently, so this should be a good addition, I guess you could say, to that. So let's just go down the list, and we'll be using the new version of Windows Photo Viewer, whatever you want to call it, in Windows 10. I think they've done a nice job with this. So we have Og, which is a 2/2 4-mana summons Lockmaw. And he mentioned earlier that, well, yeah, of course, Lockmaw is one of the other cards he made, and it should be reviewed with Lockmaw. So we will go ahead and open this guy up. It's a 6/6. So, it's a 2/2 that goes ahead and summons a 6/6 as a death rattle effect. Now, is that balanced? Well, you do have to pay 4 mana to bring out Og, and it is a legendary. If you get the death rattle effect off, then you have 8/8 of stats. If you don't get it off, then it is simply a 2/2, which means it's basically more susceptible to silence than, say, a piloted shredder, which would be the card you'd want to compare it to. So a piloted shredder is a 4/3 that may get you around 6/5 of stats if it gets its death rattle off, right? This guy, it's a 2/2 that, the silence makes it weaker. I would say this card is a little bit strong. A little bit too strong. I think it's more powerful than Piloted Shredder. I mean, if we're saying that Piloted Shredder is the baseline and new cards that are going to be good need to be stronger than Piloted Shredder, then yeah, I guess. But this would be kind of power creep if they actually included it in the game. Yes, it's weaker if it gets silenced, but how often do you really see people silencing piloted shredders? Given this card would basically bait out a silence, because no one wants to give your opponent a 6/6. So you could think of it as 2/2 silence bait. And in that case, maybe it's not that supremely overpowered. In my mind, it's probably a little stronger than Piloted Shredder, and Piloted Shredder is really strong. So if this card did exist, it would be probably played in a lot of different decks. Just because getting out a 6/6 is pretty dang crazy. Alright, next up, we have Bezool, the Herald of the Fell, which is a 5/4 demon for 5 mana. Kind of reminds me of, what's that guy called? The Battlecry, deal 3 damage if you have a dragon in your hand. The Blackwing Corruptor, I believe he's called, which is a strong card in Malygos Warlock, but Dragon Synergy just hasn't been overpowered enough to push it in many decks. It's basically just Malygos that runs it. Now, this guy, as a battle cry, deals 3 damage and restores 5 health to your hero with no requirements, basically, whatsoever. So, straight up, it's better than a Blackwing Corruptor. And one of the reasons Blackwing Corruptor isn't played in most decks is because you have to have at least 4 or 6 dragons in the deck for it to even be considered viable, because you need to be able to trigger its battle cry, or else it's just a crappy 5/4. Not only that, but it's also a demon, so this can be played in demon synergy decks. Downside is, if you void color this out on accident, then you lose the battle cry, and that's kind of meh. But I don't think that's that big of a downside. You'd still run void color, you'd still be playing other demons. And a battle cry like that is really crazy. I mean, think about it. Healbot is restore 8 health to your hero. Blackwing Corruptor is deal 3 damage. Both of those are played for their battle cry. You get both in one, no requirements, 5/4 stats, which is decent, and literally no drawbacks. This card is hands down overpowered. Without a question, if this card existed, it would be played in every single Warlock deck. It's pretty much Dr. Boom. Okay, next up. Belligerent Talstrider. It's a 3/3 beast for 3 mana that can't be silenced. That is an interesting concept. That means if you did give it like a Defender of Argus taunt, your opponent wouldn't be able to just cheat its way through it with like a owl. And given that I was playing some Handlock earlier today where the Face Hunters just miraculously have both owls in their hand, that is tempting to play. Now, is it actually good? A 3/3 for 3 mana is pretty weak at this point. I mean, they're coming out with the Angel of Darkness and the Angel of Light. I forget what their names are, but the ones where if you cast a spell on them, they get crazy effects like Divine Shield and deal 3 damage to a random enemy. And on top of that, those creatures have 4 health instead of 3. In terms of stats, it would be really hard to justify playing this in maybe like Defender of August Taunt Druid. I'm thinking that's kind of what we're going for here, the beast synergy there, in addition to being a taunt. Actually, if you play a Houndmaster on the back of it, it becomes a 5/5 taunt, and the mana curve works up nicely there, so it would become a turn 3 you play it, if it survives, it becomes a 5/5 taunt, and that's actually not too bad. Given that, I could maybe see it in mid-range Hunter, actually. That, or if Control Hunter ever became a thing, which, you know, who knows. So far, it's looking like it's still not going to be. The hero power has just never really been about controlling the board. It's always been about killing your opponent. And yeah, you do have the 2/3 for 2 mana, the sniper dude who lets you target minions with your hero power. But that thing never lives on the board long enough. It's an interesting card. I think it could see some play. I actually like this concept a lot. Can't be silenced. Okay, next up we got Bound Inferno, which is a Shaman minion. Charge, Overload 2, 5 mana, 5/3. So really you're paying 7 mana there for a 5 attack charge minion that also has 3 health. Given Overload isn't nearly as bad as paying 2 extra mana. I mean, you can Lava Shock, and with a card like this, Lava Shock might become a thing. The other thing to keep in mind is this would probably be a finisher card. So you pay 5 mana, it's basically giving you a Leroy to the face. And yeah, I mean, given that Leroy is still played in a couple decks like Face Hunter, that actually seems like it could see some play. I think most people would use it as a finisher, or you'd use it in conjunction with Lava Shock. But a 5 mana is the same as Leroy, actually, so that is relatively balanced-ish. Maybe a little on the strong side if you factor in the fact that it's Shaman, it's doesn't give your opponents whelps. You can play it without it being the finisher turn. That's what makes it a little bit stronger than Leroy, I think. In addition, you know, you got your Wind Fury cards. You have Rockbite a Weapon. Yeah, I mean, what if you did Wind Fury on this guy? Rockbite a Weapon. Makes it a 16 damage combo for 8 mana. That's pretty legit, actually. Yeah, that's pretty legit. This card is pretty strong. You know, when you factor all things considered. It would see play. It would see play if it was released into the game, and I would say it's on the strong side along the lines of piloted Shredder strength. Okay, next up, Bronze Drake. 2 mana, 2/2. It's always good to see more dragon cards, even if this isn't a real card yet. Has +2 attack while you have a dragon, so it becomes a 4 attack, 2 health minion if you have a dragon. Which, if you consider the fact that, you know, there's cards like Knife Juggler out there, which are almost certainly going to get 1 Juggler off for a free damage point, that's not that crazy. I mean, if you compare it to other cards as well, like the little guy that scales up with attack. I'm going to pack a big punch. Micro Machine, that's the word I'm looking for. And that guy, if he's unchecked, quickly becomes a 4/2 or 5/2 or even stronger than that. So this card is actually relatively balanced. The only deck you play it in is obviously Dragon, even if it didn't have to be a Dragon minion that gave it the +2 attack. Oh, well, actually, if other minions could give it +2 attack, then it probably would be OP. But given that it has to be a Dragon deck, I'd say it's pretty balanced. It does open up another option for Dragon decks. You don't necessarily have to run either no low-cost Dragons or Fairy Dragon. And when you factor in Fairy Dragon's immunity to spells, a 3/2 that's immune to spells and a 4/2 that can die to just about everything, yeah, fairly balanced. Is it good enough to see play? I don't know about that. I just have a feeling it would die too easily. And probably wouldn't get to attack. They'd have to be like a pretty aggressive Dragon deck. The Dragon cards would have to reflect a more aggressive playstyle, I think. I don't think you would run this in a controlling dragon deck. But in aggro, could work. Okay, next card. Bronze Skyraiser is a 7 attack, 5 health minion, 7 mana, which makes it pretty weak to BGH. Keep in mind, you're basically comparing this against Dr. Boom for the 7 card slot. Dr. Boom, of course, 7/7, gives you 2 Boom bots, which deal 1 to 4 damage as a death battle. Pretty crazy. And this guy deals 2 damage as a Battlecry. Is it better than Boom? No, it's not better than Boom. But it is a common, and I think what Cold was going for here was to create another 7-cost option that people could use. Not necessarily for it to be an OP card or to be an auto-include in every dragon deck, as you can see it as a dragon. It's not terrible. It's not terrible. But I think in competitive, this would not see play. There's just really no need for a 2 damage Battlecry decent body minion. If this was 6 cost, maybe it would see some play. But at 7 cost, I think it's too expensive to really justify even in a dragon deck. Okay, next up we have Charming Hero. At the end of each turn, gain +1/+1, 0/1 creature, costs 1 mana. Each turn would mean that it is both your turn and their turn, so effectively we're talking about Gruul here. I think I did actually take a look at this card before this video, and I talked to Cold about it, and he points out, yes, this creature is more vulnerable to silence. If you silence the 1 mana creature, it drops down to a 0/1. But so does a Nerubian Egg, but Nerubian Egg is still insanely good. This creature is going to become a 1/2 at the end of its turn. You play this on turn 1, you're trying to get like an aggressive cheese one. If they have an answer to it like Arcane Shot, okay, it dies just like any other 1-cost mana minion. Unless, of course, it's Mortal Coil, then it actually doesn't die to it because it'll have 2 health. So basically you need a Wrath, or you need a Dark Bomb, or you need to already have a minion on the board in order to deal with this guy. If you go first, then sure, you can have a creature to counter this, in which case he would never play it. If he plays this first, you don't have a minion on the board, so you have to spend a 2 mana spell to even have a chance to remove this. Except for... No, wait. I was going to say they're coming out with a new Druid minion, but that's a 2/1 charge. It's basically a Bluegill Warrior for 2 mana. So this card almost always trades up. That's the thing. It almost always trades up with a Wrath, almost always trades up with a Dark Bomb, or if your opponent has no answer to Charming Hero, it quickly becomes a 2/3, then a 3... once it becomes a 2/3, that's already crazy good value for 1 mana. If it lives past that, then you basically just won the game, because it will become like a 3/4, a 4/5, etc. Eventually your opponent will remove it, but you only paid 1 mana to get this guy out. I think this creature would be balanced a little bit better at 2 mana, but at 1 mana, this thing becomes incredibly overpowered if it's ever unchecked. And even if it is checked, it drains a 2 mana spell from your opponent. And to have that be so reliable for draining your opponent's spells is just, it's game breaking. This card would be 2 in every deck. Literally 2 in every deck. Even if your opponent can silence it with an Ironbeak Owl. That would be the one answer to it. A 2/1 Ironbeak Owl that silences this. Then you actually have a minion, and you didn't really pay 2 mana. You more like paid 1 mana worth of stats to counter a 1 mana creature. But that's... If this card existed, every deck would have to have 2 Ironbeak Owls to counter Charming Hero, and then the silences wouldn't be available for anything else in the deck. It would really change the game a lot, and not for the better. It's like Undertaker, but worse. Really, it is. Okay. Cheat Death. Your hero has immune this turn. Right. So, how he explained this to me is, it's basically like Ice Block, but it would only last... Actually, I'm not sure if it lasts until the end of your next turn. I would go out on a limb and say that this card would this turn. I'm thinking that means until the start of your next turn, but that could be wrong. Actually, by the text, I think this turn would usually mean until your turn is over. So, let's just consider both scenarios then. If this card means until the end of your turn, basically you can swing at an opponent like a 8 attack minion, say with your Assassin's Blade, and not take any damage. And that's not terrible, actually. Basically, you could basically use it as heal for 8 for 0 mana, in that specific circumstance. But really beyond that, it's basically just heal for X. That's what I'm thinking. Now, if it does carry into your opponent's turn, as a 0 mana spell, 0 mana spells are really dangerous. Not only could it be played with, say, Gadget Sand Auctioneer again, but also that means your opponent has to focus on killing your dudes. If it lasts on your opponent's turn, then this would be incredibly OP for Mill Rogue. There's no way this could mean your opponent's turn either. Just think about it. You just stall for time, and then you mill your opponent some cards, give him a board clear, and then you basically don't even have to bother having an early game because you played the equivalent of Frost Nova for 0 mana. Except it also works on opponent's spells and opponent's hero powers for anything that concerns hitting your face. I think this card is more balanced as a 0 mana card where it's only your turn. Then that's reasonable. It's basically 0 mana heal for X, which isn't too bad. When you consider Flash Heal, a new card they're coming out with for Priest, that's 1 mana heal 5. 0 mana heal X, where X is the amount that you try to face tank. Yeah, that seems fair. That seems fair to me. And I think I prefer it like that, because if Cheat Death was a full turn, including your opponent's turn, it would be game-breaking, and as much as I like Mill Rogue, that would be such a cheesy way to win. Okay, next up. Coil Scar Naga. It's a 7 mana 6/6. Interesting because it's not BGHable. Most things 7 mana or more are BGHable. Destroy a minion that costs 2 or less. So it could be good for taking out Mad Scientists, Armor Smiths, especially Armor Smiths. With destroy it without the warrior gaining any armor. Well, yeah, basically anything that's 2 cost or less. Now the question is killing a 2 cost mana minion even relevant at turn 7? I would say not especially, but you do get a decent body out of it. If you compare this to Stampeding Coda, which is a 3/5, destroy a 2 attack mana minion or less, which is a little less versatile than 2 cost. I'd say it's about on par, given you have to pay 2 more mana. The body is a little bit overall stronger, but the mana cost does make it a big thing to consider. When you include a 7 cost card in your deck, it's a big deal. It's a big deal. 5 cost, yeah, you can get away with putting a few in your deck, and usually most decks do. I think this card is reasonably balanced. I don't think it would replace Dr. Boom, and it would very rarely see play. It would be pretty good in Arena, though, to be honest. Okay, next card. Crazed Worgen. When a player draws a card, gain 2 attack. 5 mana, 5/3. No stealth. Interesting. So that would be really good with Cold Light Oracle. Actually, with Cold Light Oracle, that would be plus 8 attack per Cold Light. 13 attack. 2 Cold Lights makes it 21 attack. Yeah. Like in an average deck, like a typical rogue deck, yeah, that effect would be pretty balanced. But Cold Light, if this thing lives on the board, it'll do 13 or 21 damage. Though you could say the same thing, you could really say the same thing about Holy Warrior, the new priest, 3/5 for 4 mana, which is better stats than this. And I don't know if that card's going to see play, because you could just circle healing and gain 20 attack, and then you win the game, combo decks. Because this guy, he has no stealth. Though, with Rogue, you can easily stealth a minion with, say, Master of Shadows or a Conceal. Without stealth, it dies. With stealth, with this 4 card specifically, Conceal, Crazed Worgen, Cold Light Oracle, and Cold Light Oracle, or even just one Cold Light, because your opponent draws a card on his turn and then you draw one on your turn. So with just one Cold Light, it would actually be, let's see, 8 attack plus 4, 17 attack. 17 attack if it lives one turn and you play a Cold Light. 3 card deal 17 damage, that's insane. I don't know if this card could be allowed to be played. It's really deadly as a combo card. I think if you drop the base attack to like 1, then maybe. But this is just giving you too much theoretical power off of 3 cards. All you need is Conceal, and it becomes insanely powerful. Even without Cold Light Oracle, that's 9 damage to your opponent's face the following turn. You could always play with Cold Blood, so 13. 17, if you have any other methods of drawing cards. Sprint, for instance. That's not too hard to come by. Preparation Sprint, then it just becomes insane. Too powerful. The effect, it's like Amani Berserker, but I think it's actually better. In most cases. It's a little bit easier to pull off, because Patron Warrior, it needs basically to have Grim Patron, to have played Emperor Tharzan, to have a Berserker in his hand, the Warsong Commander, Inner Rage, Whirlwind, and a Death Spite equipped, and then you can instantly win the game. This guy requires like 3 cards, and that's... You don't want a more broken combo deck than Patron Warrior, trust me. Okay, next up, Crusader Hammer. It's a 6 mana, 4/3 weapon, 4 paladins. Your hero has +2 attack when attacking Death Rattle minions with Death Rattle, which would make it a 6/3 against Death Rattle minions. For 6 mana, I don't think this card is very good. The thing about attacking minions with Death Rattle specifically is the only card I can really think of where this guy would be good at smashing is a Sludge Belcher. And given that it's 6 mana, I'm assuming that's what you were thinking, Colt. But 6 mana to have a Sludge Belcher smasher that's basically just... I just don't see it. Like, you can kill piloted shredders with it, but the extra attack is meaningless. If the meta was ever something like Sneed's old Shredder and all the piloted Sky Golems. No, even if it was all the piloted Sky Golem only has 4 health. It's a card that, theoretically, yeah, if there were 6 health Death Rattle minions, it would smash them. But the effect is pretty pointless in the current meta. And for 6 mana, I think you just want to get more out of a card than that. I'd rather just play True Silvers. The situation isn't there for it to be worth playing a 3 durability, 4 attack, 6 mana weapon. In general. I mean, I could be wrong about that, but I'm pretty sure it's just a subpar weapon. Okay, next up, Deep Freeze. It's a common 3 mana spell. It's actually a secret. When an enemy attacks, deal 3 damage to the enemy hero and freeze it. Freeze the enemy hero. Interesting. No, freeze it. Okay, the wording on that is a little bit funky. I think freeze it actually means the enemy minion when the minion attacks. So you freeze the minion, and you deal 3 damage to the enemy hero. And that would be pretty good against Handlock. I mean, think about it. You freeze a giant, deal 3 damage, knocking the Handlock down to level like 8 or 9 health. And then you just Fireball freeze, Fireball Frostbolt the enemy's face. Now, if freeze it means freeze the enemy hero, then that is Crazy Burst for something like Ice Lance, which could be interesting. I wonder if this would be any good in a freeze deck, like a Freeze Mage, the classic Freeze Mage. I think it would be, and I would assume this is where he's going with that. It's an interesting secret. I think it is... Is it good enough to see play for 3 damage? It's kind of hard to say. It's kind of hard to say. I think it would be worth experimenting with this card. I can't say for certain whether this card is actually good enough to, say, be right alongside there with cards like Frost Nova, Ice Block, Ice Barrier, but it would be a pretty cool addition to the game, I think. I would play around with it. Okay, next up we have Dragon Hunter, 4 mana, 4/3, destroy a dragon. Do you really want more big game hunter cards in the game? This card would either not be played, or it would be played against any dragon decks. Basically, big game hunter is run because there are enough 7 attack or more cards in the game right now. Cards like Hemet Nessingway are not played because beasts, basically it's just hunters who have them. And while beasts may become good enough for druids, it's not like Dragon, where Dragon can kind of be played in almost any deck, and they are pushing some new Dragon cards out there, like they have a new Warrior one coming out there. Alexstrasza's Charger, or Banner Holder, something like that. I don't really like the concept of destroy a creature by targeting it. It's, you know, I really used to like these kind of cards, tech cards where it just destroys, you know, certain metas. Big Game Hunter is really annoying for me, though. It really is. I don't like Big Game Hunter, because I just do not, unless I'm playing Handlock, I don't play 8 attack mana, 7 attack mana minions. 7 attack minions or more. Like, at all. I'll just attack against BGH by, or anti-attack, by not playing them. And that's not fun. That's really not fun. Given this card is only good against dragons, and I don't think dragons would ever be, like, in half the decks, I guess maybe it's okay to have this in the game. I'm not the biggest fan of it, though. Okay, moving on. Dragon Rider. Charge, Battlecry. If you're holding a dragon, gain +1/+1 for 2, 5 mana. This is actually remarkably like the card I was just talking about, the Alexstrasza's Charger, which is a 2 mana minion, 2/3. If you're holding a dragon, gain +1 attack and charge. This becomes a 5/3 charge. That becomes a 3/3 charge. This is 5 mana. This is, the Charger is 2 mana, the Alexstrasza's one. 4/2 charge, is that worth playing for 5 mana? Of course not. Is a 5/3 charge worth playing for 5 mana? Probably. So could you play this in a dragon deck? Sure, you could. It's kind of redundant now that they have the Alexstrasza's one, though. I don't think I'd like having 2 cards that do basically the same thing in the game, but this card was released first, or came up with first, as far as I know anyway. It's okay, I guess. Yeah, it's another card for dragon decks, really nothing special about that. I'm not the biggest fan of charge minions, to be honest though, but yeah, it's okay. Okay, Dragonoid Destroyer. You may remember Dragonoid Crusher, 6 mana, 6/6, becomes a 9/9 if you have your opponent at 15 health or less. So this is another conditional card. 5/5 dragon for 5 mana, average stats. If you're holding a dragon, deal 5 damage to the enemy hero. Interesting. That really synergizes well with the Dragonoid Crusher. So this would be for a aggressive dragon deck. And going back to the Bronze Drake, I could see these two being run together. Try to put as much pressure onto your opponent as quick as possible. Basically playing Face Dragon, SM Orc Dragon. It is a Battlecry. 5 damage, maybe slightly OP. I think 4 would be more balanced. The stats, I just think of Blackwing Corruptor. If you're holding a dragon, deal 3 damage. Because 3 damage as a battle cry to anything is probably better than 5 damage to the enemy hero, but this also has 5/5 stats. It could be justified, actually. It could be. I think that card's actually reasonably well balanced. Okay, so Dragonoid Destroyer, that's just fine. The idea, of course, make Dragonoid Crusher actually get its effect, and maybe Dragonoid Crusher could be played if aggressive Dragon decks did become a thing. Interesting thing to think about. Okay, Dragonoid Enforcer. 4/4, 5 mana. Whenever a minion attacks your hero, deal 2 damage to it. To the minion, I assume. Which basically means this thing has taunt, making it basically a 5 mana 4/4 taunt. Is that actually good? No, it's really not. The only thing going for it is that it is a dragon, but would you play a card that says dragon just because it has dragon on it, even though it's 4/4? No, you wouldn't. It's basically just a 4/4 taunt. Your opponent will see this. They don't want to take the damage, generally, unless they already have lethal. And if they do have lethal, then this is actually worse than taunt. If they don't have lethal, they're just going to kill it. And 4 health for 5 mana isn't that hard to deal with. Sludge Belcher effectively has 7 health. So this card would not be played. It's just not good enough, honestly. Okay, next up. Dwarven Demolitionist. 3/2 for 3 mana, ignore armor. Meaning it could deal damage through armor. But this would be the only card in the game that can do that. So the only situation where this would really be useful is your opponent's got like 20 armor up. You're trying to finish him off, and he's actually down to 1 or 2 HP. Which almost never happens. And if you're actually playing an aggressive deck, your opponent probably isn't going to have much armor anyway. Against, say, like Patron Warrior, you don't want to ignore the armor. You actually want to attack the armor, because if you knock your opponent down below 30 HP, it enables Battle Rage. So that effect is actually not very good. It's interesting. I mean, if you had more cards like this, maybe it could be an interesting late-game finisher. But the thing you got to consider is that only like 1 or 2 decks actually have armor. This should really be at least a 3/3, honestly. Because ignores armor is not really that beneficial of an effect. If this was a 3/3, it would barely be better, if better at all, than just a regular 3/3. And a 3/3 isn't playable. This card is pretty bad for 3 mana. 2 mana, it would still be pretty bad. This card is just not playable. Okay, next up, Entangle. Give a minion can't attack. Okay, so it's effectively removing a creature from the game. Let's say your opponent isn't playing Sun Fury Protector or Defender of Argus, so it's not like you're fighting a handlock where they'll just turn it into a big ancient watcher. The closest thing to a remove a remove just by paying the mana cost that Druid has right now is 6 mana. Recycle, send a card back into the opponent's deck, which doesn't see play at all. Nourish, not Nourish, shoot, the 1 mana card that Naturalize, destroy a minion, give your opponent 2 cards. I like that card for like playing around with mill decks, and sometimes even kind of control druids, but it's not considered viable. I don't think this card would be any different. It's too much mana for basically just kind of pseudo-silencing your opponent's minion. It's silencing your opponent's ability to attack. And many decks can just play around with this. They could silence their own minion, in which case they paid half of an owl, half of a 2 mana minion to get rid of a 3 mana effect. And at that point, all you did was really delay it. If you could, say, prevent your opponent from having a board, have their opponent's board be so flooded with crap that they can't play anything else, then that could be interesting. That could be a good way to win. Basically, your opponent has 5 creatures that can't attack or something like that on their board, and they have no more room to really play what they want to. Although impossible to make that happen with just entangle. It's not like your opponent's going to be playing target dummies or anything. It's an interesting thing to think about. This card, in the current state of the game, would just not be played. 3 mana is too much for its effect. If it was 1 or 2 mana, 2 mana I could see it being playable. 1 mana, I think it would actually be pretty good. Especially if you knew what kind of deck your opponent was. Say it was like a priest or something like that. And priests don't really play Defender of Argus, but they do play big minions. Yeah, you could entangle a minion. You could even silence a minion with an Ironbeak Owl like Ysera, then entangle it, and then all they got is a useless 4/12 on the board. And given that that would still cost 3 or 4 mana if this was 1 or 2 mana to play, it's 2 cards and 3 or 4 mana to basically neutralize a big guy, I think that's reasonable. I mean, Execute is 1 mana, destroy a dude. BGH is just 1 card, blow up anything that has 7 attack or more. This card costs too much mana, but the idea is interesting. Okay, Exorcism. When your opponent plays a minion with Death Rattle, silence it. Secret. Okay. 1 mana, of course, as all Paladin secrets are. So, 1 mana basically neutralize a piloted shredder. So it's 1 mana to basically destroy a 2 mana piloted shredder effect. Or 1 mana to get rid of a Sylvanas' steel minion, which is actually pretty good. And, you know, if your opponent was planning on going Sylvanas Shadowflame, that actually becomes pretty decent. But let's say that's not the scenario that's going on. Let's say that your opponent doesn't really run Death Rattle minions or doesn't run any that are worth silencing. Maybe this only silences like a 1/1 web spinner or at best a haunted creeper. It becomes pretty meh. It's hard to get more than 1 mana of value out of this card. I don't think this card is playable because I like Avenge more than this. Avenge gets you +3/+2, which is 2 mana worth of stats, and surprises your opponent. I think Avenge is better than this, and Avenge is not really played. Unless you're running some kind of crazy secrets deck, and the meta is really Death Rattle heavy, this card would just not see play. It would have to be like a really aggressive Mad Scientist deck for it to work at all. Maybe it could be good for killing Sludge Belcher, the Sludge Belcher minion. You know, if you made this deal 2 damage to a Death Rattle minion and then silence it, okay, that would be game breaking. Maybe 1 damage, I don't know. Okay, next card. We've got the Fell Drake. 4/4 for 3 mana, charge Battlecry Destroyer friendly minion. While that is a big drawback, if you're playing a face deck, there's a good chance you don't even have a minion on your board to begin with, in which case that drawback is not really that big of a deal. It's like saying the Leroy drawback is big, but you just don't play Leroy until the right circumstances appear. So this card would go in... Actually, this card would go in every aggressive face deck ever, even if they weren't playing dragons. Because already a Wolf Rider is playable as a 3/1, this is a 4/4 with charge, which is insane. Yes, it has the Battlecry Destroy friendly minion, but only a moron is going to play it when they have a minion they don't want to kill on the board. You could even use this in conjunction with Nerubian Ag. Churn 2 Nerubian Ag, churn 3 Feldrake. Oh, suddenly you have 2 4/4s on the board and one's charging your face for 4 damage. So it would be really good in Zoo, too. Just for that reason. Well, worth considering in Zoo. Maybe not as good as a Face Hunter. But that card is insanely OP. If you want to balance this card, maybe drop the health down to 1. 2 at the highest. Just 4/4. You gotta be kidding me. Way too strong. Just way too strong.